On a chilly Thursday morning, Irene Dalton found a glossy envelope on her doormat. Inside, a family Thanksgiving invitation, mass-printed, unsigned. The cold air slipped in as she stood by the door, the envelope fluttering slightly between her fingers. She stared at the curlicue lettering, an image of golden turkeys embossed on ivory cardstock, but there was no handwriting, no warm scribble in the margin, not even a "looking forward to seeing you." Just her name, machine-printed, third in a line of recipients. She closed the door gently, set the envelope on the small kitchen counter, and turned to her morning ritual. The cottage smelled faintly of cinnamon and the lingering strength of yesterday's coffee. Irene folded her checkered apron, still warm from the dryer, and placed it neatly on the back of a kitchen chair. The record player in the corner gave a soft crackle before Frank Sinatra's voice drifted out, gentle and familiar. She moved slowly, filling the kettle with water, running her hand once along the windowsill where dried leaves had gathered. Every Thursday, the mailman paused for $1 and a smile. She always had it ready, folded crisp inside a coffee-stained book of coupons. That morning, she had handed it over with the same gentle nod as always, even as the envelope nestled beneath the other mail, already drawing its weight in memory. She placed the invitation next to a ceramic mug she kept only for peppermint tea. The name Dalton on the return address wasn't a surprise, but the lack of effort, the faceless tone, made the air in the room cool further. A knock came, soft and slow, on the side door. Ruth Allen, in a knit vest and wind-rumpled scarf, stood holding a mason jar. "Irene," she smiled, "fig jam. This batch turned out better than the last. I used lemon this time." Irene took it with both hands. "Thank you. I still have some of the peach one from July." "You keep everything," Ruth teased, stepping inside with familiar ease. She looked toward the invitation on the counter. "Family's still holding the Thanksgiving dinner?" Irene nodded, her eyes unreadable. "Will you go?" Ruth asked. Her tone was gentle, but not pitying, just old enough to know what it meant to ask without pressing. "I haven't decided," Irene said. She unscrewed the lid from the jam, the scent of lemon and ripe fig rising. "It's early still." They sat for a short while, the way two women do when words are optional and warmth is drawn from shared silences. Ruth eventually left with a promise to return Sunday with her husband's blueberry scones. Later, Irene pulled out a small lacquered box from a drawer in her hallway. Inside lay 10 years' worth of holiday invitations, birthday announcements, and baby shower RSVPs, all printed, none personalized. She added the new card to the stack. No rage in her chest, only a dull and even acceptance. Afterward, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, fingers calm against the keys. She navigated to her banking app, scrolling past line after line labeled, Dalton Residence, Electric, Dalton Residence, Water, Home Protection Plan. The totals blurred after a while. Her hand hovered over the auto payment settings. One by one, she deactivated them, electricity, water, internet, even the monthly landscaping. She didn't rush. There was no music now, only the ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. That night, she made herself tea and stared out the window at the amber tree-line. She whispered, "I think I'm done." Vanessa Dalton walked the grand staircase of her new home, her heels echoing against marble, a glass of rose in hand. The living room below glowed in candlelight, not because the lights were dim, but because her lighting app allowed for holiday warmth with a single voice command. She admired the reflection of the chandelier in the glass coffee table, adjusted a pale gold pillow, and smiled faintly at her own polished silhouette. Behind her, the smart diffuser exhaled lavender and pine. A flower arrangement stood at perfect attention on the entryway console, white lilies, blush roses, eucalyptus, imported that morning. She swiped a finger across the glass-top dining table to check for dust, though the cleaning service had just left. Across town, the kitchen in Irene's modest cottage filled with the aroma of chili. The slow cooker simmered quietly as Sinatra crooned on the radio. Irene peeled carrots with steady rhythm, the paring knife tapping gently against a ceramic bowl. Harold always said Vanessa photographed well. He said it with pride, like a father who knew how to market a family image. Of Irene, he used to joke, "She's not easy to explain, bit too reserved for guests." It had become a silent wall between them. Vanessa perched at the kitchen island and held her phone at just the right angle. "Ready?" she asked. Esther adjusted her scarf and fluffed her hair. "Let's show them what a real Thanksgiving looks like." The video call began. On screen, distant cousins, in-laws, and family friends smiled from living rooms with paper decorations and toddlers in lap. Vanessa gave a warm laugh, walking them through the house as if hosting a private tour. "This is the foyer, those are Italian tiles, real Carrara marble. Over here is the formal dining room," she said, panning over a table set with crystal glasses, gold-rimmed plates, and folded napkins in the shape of swans. "Oh, Vanessa, it's beautiful," came a chorus of voices. Esther beamed. "She deserves it. She's worked so hard." Harold, off camera, added, "She's always had an eye for taste." Not a single person asked where Irene would be for the holiday. Through the open kitchen window of Irene's cottage, Ruth's voice drifted from next door. "They're doing a feature on the house. The Westbury Weekly. Says it's a symbol of local success." Irene stirred the pot slowly, her back to the radio. The chili thickened as she added a dash of cumin, then paused. Outside, leaves scraped along the porch. The wind had picked up. Ruth appeared at the back door later, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a grocery bag with cranberries and sage. "Dropped by the co-op, got extra in case you're still making that stuffing this year." "I might," Irene said, without looking up. "You saw the house photos, right?" Vanessa really leaned into the neutral palette. "Esther said the kitchen has 2 sinks." Irene nodded faintly. "For her and the chef, maybe." Ruth gave a half laugh. "I suppose." Vanessa's video call continued into the evening, replayed now and then by Ruth's husband through the thin walls of the shared hedge. Irene tried not to listen, but every so often a word caught her ear. "Modern elegance, generational blessing, she's really pulled through after the divorce." Later that night, Irene checked her phone before bed. There was only one message. No greeting. No punctuation. Just, "Could you bring your pecan pie again this year?" It was a hit. She stared at it for a long moment. The room was quiet, save for the low hum of the fridge and the tick of the mantel clock. The air smelled of nutmeg and simmered beans. On the far side of the room, a crocheted curtain swayed lightly where the window didn't seal quite right. Irene slowly crumples the text, deletes it from her phone, and looks toward the fireplace. The day before Thanksgiving, the town buzzed with grocery runs and pie orders, except in Irene's house, where only the sound of a teapot boiling filled the space. The kettle whistled gently as Irene lifted it from the stove and poured steaming water over a bag of Earl Grey. The scent of bergamot and black tea rose slowly, curling into the quiet kitchen air. She stirred in a splash of milk, set the spoon down on a folded napkin, and moved toward the window. Outside, the first flurries of snow twisted between bare trees, brushing rooftops in soft white. The town of Westbury Hollow seemed to pulse with last-minute energy. Down the street, neighbors hauled paper bags filled with canned cranberries and frozen pies. Wreaths appeared on doors. The local radio station had switched to jazz-infused holiday tracks, and even the mail carrier wore a scarf knit in autumn browns. Inside Irene's cottage, time moved differently. The table was spread with files from Willowbrook, the senior center's weekly medication chart, a list of Thanksgiving volunteers, and a note reminding her to call Mrs. Ellison's niece about a change in visitation schedule. She worked through them methodically, her handwriting precise, her back straight despite the chill. A soft knock on the back door interrupted her rhythm. Ruth entered without waiting for a full invitation, cheeks rosy from the wind, a small container of pumpkin rolls tucked in a cloth-lined basket. "Still haven't lit the fire, have you?" Ruth asked, already heading toward the stove. "It's too cold to pretend you're immune." Irene smiled faintly and took the basket. "They smell like cinnamon." "Fresh this morning," Ruth said. "Jack didn't like them, said the crust was too soft. I told him softness is a virtue at our age." They sat across from one another in the kitchen, the rolls between them. "You always keep it so neat in here," Ruth said. Her eyes drifted to the small framed photograph on the counter, Irene, age 12, standing beside a garden with an older man in suspenders and a cap. Your grandfather? She asked, though she already knew. Irene nodded. That was the summer before he had the stroke. Ruth sipped her tea. I still think about that scholarship you turned down. Full ride, wasn't it? Engineering? Irene looked down at the table. Yes. It didn't feel like a choice at the time. You were only 17, and you stayed. I thought it was the right thing. Ruth's voice softened. It was. Even if no one else remembers. Later that afternoon, Irene turned on her old laptop, intending only to check the center's holiday staffing chart. A folder marked Family Trust, Legacy Plan, caught her attention as she closed out her tabs. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside was a digital scan of the home equity agreement for the Dalton property, the one that eventually funded the mansion Vanessa now flaunted. Her eyes moved down the legal language slowly. And there it was, nestled near the bottom of the second page. Silent guarantor, Miss Irene Dalton, Westbury Hollow Branch co-signatory. She closed her eyes for a moment, then scrolled to the next file. A contractor agreement. Logo at the top left, Ruiz Design and Build. The name pulled something loose in her memory. Michael Ruiz. High school classmate. Quiet, awkward, often behind in homework. His family had owned a tiny home repair business that barely scraped by. She remembered he'd once sold his art supplies to pay for graduation fees. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Remember to arrive early to help with setup. No drama this year, please. Irene didn't reply. She stood, walked to the mantel, and lit a candle in the small dish she reserved for remembrance. The flame flickered, casting soft shadows over the crocheted curtain, the wood-paneled walls, the quiet pieces of a life unpolished but steady. She sat by the window and watched as the snow thickened, gathering in slow layers over the bushes and walkways. The street lamps outside flickered to life one by one, dotting the road in a golden glow that shimmered against the frost. Her laptop pinged. She turned, lifted the screen. An email had arrived. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, Irene. Michael Ruiz. At 5:37 p.m. sharp on Thanksgiving Day, the lights in the Dalton mansion blinked once, then went out completely. The chandelier above the formal dining table gave one final flicker before plunging the room into silence. Conversations stuttered. A spoon clinked against a plate and then stopped. The glass candle holders lining the center of the table cast long, quivering shadows across Vanessa's meticulously folded linen napkins. She stood at the head of the table, mouth open mid-toast, her hand still raised in a delicate gesture, rose swaying in the glass. A second passed. Then another. A gust of wind howled faintly outside. It must be the system, she said, her voice pitching slightly higher than usual. The generator should kick in any second. From the far end of the room, a guest whispered, "Do you think it's the storm?" Esther reached under the table to fiddle with her phone. "My signal's gone." Harold rubbed his forehead and leaned toward a dimly lit thermostat, tapping the screen. "Nothing." He turned to Vanessa, eyebrows raised. "I told the contractor last week," she said, brushing a curl behind her ear. "He said everything was up to date." In the kitchen, a beep sounded from the locked fridge door. The oven had stopped mid-cycle, halting the roast. The water in the guest bathroom slowed to a trickle. Guests began to shift in their seats. Jackets came back on. Distant cousins whispered about heading out early, citing roads and visibility. One couple apologized gently, saying their sitter expected them back soon. The quiet buzz of the house, a hum of appliances, heat flowing, electronics running, had vanished. All that remained was the uncomfortable murmur of disrupted plans. Vanessa paced into the foyer, her heels sounding loud against the now silent marble. She clutched her phone, refreshing the screen, waiting for bars that wouldn't return. A knock at the door turned heads. Michael Ruiz stepped in, calm as ever, a light dusting of snow on his shoulders. He shook off the cold and glanced at the dim room, candlelight bouncing off high ceilings and stunned expressions. "Rough timing," he said evenly, looking around. "I heard about the outage from a neighbor. Thought I'd check in." Harold brightened. You know the system better than anyone. Can you? Michael nodded once and headed toward the service panel. He crouched, inspected the breaker, then opened a small control box near the hallway closet. I'm seeing system alerts dating back a few weeks, he said. Missed payments. Maintenance delay flags. Vanessa moved closer. That can't be right. We had this installed with the best plan. Michael stood slowly. This project was tied to a maintenance fund I was told would be renewed this fall. It wasn't. A pause fell. The words settled in like fresh snow, light, but impossible to ignore. Esther opened her mouth, then closed it. Harold frowned. You mean the trust? Michael didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the darkened dining room, where guests sat awkwardly over half-finished plates. Without raising his voice, he said, that fund was once covered by an anonymous donor. Irene Dalton, if I recall. I assumed it would continue. The silence that followed was different this time. Not confusion, but recognition. Someone near the kitchen muttered, Irene. From the far end of the dining table, a cousin leaned toward her husband. Wait, Irene paid for this house? Vanessa drops her wine glass. Irene watched the snow settle outside her window while the phone buzzed for the 5th time that hour. She didn't flinch. The mug of ginger tea rested in her palms, warm and fragrant, anchoring her to the present. Through the frosted glass, she could see the porch railing collecting a clean layer of white. The street was silent, save for the occasional sweep of tires over slush. In the distance, someone was shoveling a sidewalk, the scrape steady and meditative. She leaned back in the armchair, a crocheted blanket pulled over her legs, and let the phone vibrate unanswered on the end table. Ruth arrived just after dusk, wrapped in a green wool coat and holding a small glass pie dish wrapped in foil. Apple, she said. Jack won't touch leftovers after day 1. Irene smiled and made room beside her on the couch. Ruth sat with a quiet sigh, unwinding her scarf. Warm in here, Ruth noted, glancing at the fire. I let it burn longer today, Irene replied. They didn't speak much after that. Just sat and watched the snowfall blur the shapes of mailboxes and fences. The pie sat between them untouched. Irene's phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Ruth didn't ask. Across town, the Dalton mansion remained dark. A guest had tried to restart the generator and failed. The thermostat was blank. Vanessa stood wrapped in a throw blanket, pacing beside her mother while Harold argued with the property manager on speakerphone. They had called Irene 4 times already. The 5th voicemail came in fragments. Harold's voice low and clipped, the water's out. Guests are upset. I don't know what happened with the payments. Then Esther, we didn't mean to forget you. It was just a lot going on. You know how things get. The 6th came not long after. A short text. Just 1 line. Please help. Irene picked up her phone and turned it face down without reading more. Another message arrived, this one from Michael. I left your name out of the report. But they know. She read it once, nodded slightly, and set the phone aside. No reply needed. Later that evening, after Ruth had gone and the fire had burned low, the phone rang again. This time, Irene answered. There was a pause. The sound of someone drawing in a breath. Then Esther's voice, tight and tired. Can you fix this for us? Irene's voice was quiet, steady. It's too late, Mom. Irene ends the call. No tears, just stillness. A week after Thanksgiving, Irene received no more calls, and no more bills. The quiet had a new texture now. It wasn't the lonely kind that used to settle into the corners of her cottage like winter dust. This was different, as simple, unburdened. It moved with her through her days without demanding explanation. The snow remained, turning the sidewalks into soft mosaics of footprints and salt lines. Irene wore the same tan coat she'd worn for years, gloves slightly thinned at the palms, and a wool hat that had once belonged to her grandfather. She stopped by the Willowbrook Cafe each morning, where the barista had started saving her the window seat without asking. She always left a tip, folded and tucked beneath the saucer. At the senior center, she found Charles already settled by the window, his gaze vacant but content. She sat beside him with a clipboard, ready to review his notes, when he reached out suddenly and patted her hand. "Sweetheart," he murmured, eyes watery and unfocused. "You came back. You always come back." She smiled, not correcting him. Instead, she adjusted the wool throw across his lap and let him talk. "Others left," he said. "But you stayed. That's what I remember." Later that afternoon, as she swept the hallway outside the activity room, Ruth appeared with 2 cups of hot cider and a flyer for the town's annual tree lighting. "Starts at 6. I figured you'd say no, but thought I'd ask anyway." Irene hesitated, then nodded. They sat on a wooden bench beneath bundled lights that blinked in shades of gold and green. Children sang off-key near the gazebo. The mayor said a few words no one remembered. Irene sipped slowly and watched the tree blink to life, soft lights illuminating a dozen paper ornaments shaped like snowflakes. Ruth leaned close. "It's good to see you out." "It's good to be out," Irene said. When she returned home, the porch creaked under her boots. She dusted snow from her shoulders and stepped inside, peeling off gloves and hanging her coat with practiced movement. The warmth of the room welcomed her, still carrying the faint scent of pine from a small wreath on the mantel. On the entry table lay a simple white envelope. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in clean, deliberate script. She opened it carefully. A holiday card, modest, understated. Inside, only one line, printed neatly. "You may never ask for credit. But you deserve it." It wasn't signed, but she knew. She walked to the narrow bookshelf tucked beside the fireplace. From the bottom shelf, she pulled a wooden box, worn but solid, and opened the lid. Inside, a copy of her grandfather's will, tuition receipts she'd never used, utility payment stubs, a crumpled post-it with a reminder for Harold's medication from 3 years ago, a faded photo of 2 girls, one beaming in a white dress, the other slightly behind her, eyes cast down, half in shadow. She added the card on top, smoothing its edge flat with her palm. Irene placed the box on the shelf, pours herself a cup of tea, and hums along to a Sinatra tune. No applause. No regrets. The snow had long settled, and the silence around Irene became something she chose, not something she endured. Her kindness had gone unnoticed for years, but it never needed a spotlight to matter. True generosity doesn't ask to be seen, it simply stays, like warmth from a fire lit quietly before dawn. Perhaps it's worth asking, who are the quiet ones we've overlooked? And when we take time to truly see them, we may discover that grace often wears the plainest coat.